Hello, and welcome to the Life Unstoppable podcast. I am your host, Rachelle. If this is your first time joining us, welcome to the podcast. On this podcast, we try to live our lives unstoppable in every area in our lives, especially when it comes to our relationships. If you are returning, welcome back. Hello, we are happy to be here today with you. Today's topic actually came from a listener who, if you listen to the last episode, we talked about understanding your being self-aware in your relationships and understanding different things that may trigger you. But basically, we focused on being self-aware, and in that episode, if you haven't listened, go back and listen. We did bring up emotional triggers, and we just talked about it briefly. But a viewer wrote in and wanted me to go deeper into triggers. So today's episode is about navigating your triggers and understanding how they impact your relationships. And when we talk about relationships, if you're new with us, we talk about relationships, romantic relationships, work relationships, relationships with your kids, other family members, friends. So you can apply this to any relationship that you may be in. So we're going to talk about emotional triggers, what emotional triggers are, how to recognize when you are being triggered by something in a relationship, how you should respond, and how they have an impact, how they affect our relationships for the good or the bad. And so we're going to focus in on that. Just to give you a little information about me, if this is your first time joining us, I am a certified life coach. I am also an author, and I'm a blogger and a podcast host. But we've been doing this podcast now for about 7 or 8 months, somewhere around there. And so if you're new, go back and look us up and look at some other episodes that we have. And if you missed the episode, go back and watch it or listen to it, however you listen to this podcast. So let's start off with what is an emotional trigger. And an emotional trigger is a stimulus that instantly bring up intense emotions that seem disproportionate to the current situation. These triggers are often rooted in past experiences, trauma, or unmet needs. They act as a sudden and powerful reaction that can hijack relational thought and lead to conflict with those we care about. So when we're talking about emotional triggers, we're talking about something that came up from your past, something that could be abuse. It could be the way someone spoke to you. It could be the way someone handled you. You could be triggered by something you saw. Maybe not something that directly happened to you, but something from your past that you saw that created trauma. It comes from a trauma experience. It comes from where needs weren't met in however way that could have been, and it causes you emotional pain, something emotional that you probably haven't dealt with. And so when you react with someone, when you're in a relationship with someone, or a person says something, they do something, or they don't do something that you need them to do, then this can trigger an emotional response from you. And so that's why it's important to know what emotional triggers are, what they are in you, how to recognize them, and how to help yourself, how to get it under control so it does not hijack your relationship. It does not cause an end to a relationship that may be a good relationship. So let's look at past trauma. So when we're talking about past trauma, some examples of trigger could be a specific tone of voice, the way someone projects their voice. If you were verbally abused, let's say you were verbally abused and someone constantly yelled at you, someone constantly maybe said words that put you down, constantly talked about saying that you weren't smart, you weren't enough, that you weren't I don't know, just negative talking to you, putting you down, constantly saying that you're no good, that you're not important, whatever that may be. Even lack of communication, that can be a trigger to people as well. If you're in a relationship and someone isn't talking to you, they get upset with you and maybe not talk to you for days or week, that also can trigger you. When someone, so if you're in a new relationship with someone and you have a disagreement, and if they just aren't talking, that can be a trigger point for you. Maybe they're just taking a minute to not respond and gather their thoughts, but because you have a trigger, because that's a trigger to you from a past relationship, then you lash out or you withdraw. Those are common reactions to that type of trigger, that you just lash out, and or either you withdraw yourself, you shrink down, because that's what you're used to doing when someone has verbally abused you or yelling at you or just shutting you off, not communicating with you. Those are ways that when that happened in a different relationship, how you may respond. Unmet needs, that could be, your triggers can be feeling ignored, that you feel ignored, you feel like you don't matter. When people don't check us to see, okay, what needs do you need that I'm not meeting? And it can even be a teammate at your job, someone that you work closely with, that you have to work on a project with. And if you feel like they're not meeting your needs or not helping you, that could be a trigger point as well. And a lot of times with unmet needs, when you feel ignored or you feel like what you're saying or what you're doing doesn't matter, you can start beginning to be, you can start accusing people. You can start saying things to your teammates or the person that you're in a relationship, or you can start blaming them for how you feel. And it could be that they aren't purposely trying to make you feel this way, but because in your past, a past trauma, a past relationship, that's how that person made you feel. Your response is to lash out again, is to blame them, and not realize that this is a different situation. This is a different relationship. It doesn't mean that they are the same person as before. A boss that maybe mistreated you, or a spouse that maybe mistreated you, it doesn't mean that this person that's in your life now is doing the same thing. It's just that something is triggering you to feel like that's something from my past. Also, like your core beliefs. If you're constantly getting criticized on your job, in your home, you're going to be on the defense at all times. You're always going to be defensive about yourself. You're going to want to defend who you are, what you're doing. And so criticism could be a trigger point. So it's important that you recognize that, say on your job currently, okay, they may not be criticizing you in a negative way, but just letting you know, hey, you're not meeting this particular need. We need you to do better. You're looking at that as criticism, where they're trying to give you pointers and say, hey, I need you to step it up. I need you to work harder. I need you to do this. But because of a past trauma in a relationship where they constantly criticize you, then you're going to, again, shut down. You're going to be on the defense when they are actually maybe trying to help you and point out ways that you might can do better. So it's important that you recognize your triggering points. The first step in managing triggers is to recognize them. This requires self-awareness, and like the last episode, we talked about being self-aware in your relationships, but it's also being mindful of, okay, and recognizing, okay, this is a trigger for me. When I hear this, or when somebody speaks this way, or when somebody does this is a trigger for me from something from my past. So you have to pay attention to the physical and emotional cues that signal a trigger. And you have physical sensations, intense emotional, and immediate thoughts. Those are the three ways that you could recognize a trigger is about to come on. So when you think about physical, it can be an increase in your heart rate. You know, your heart starts beating fast. You could have muscle tension where you just start tightening up, like you're clenching your fist, or you can even, like, your body can even just lump, like you're lumping down. You can have stomach pains, stomach in a knot. I would personally get a lump in my throat. When I would get a lump in my throat, when I was being verbally or emotionally abused, and I could feel that coming on, I would get a lump in my throat. So these are ways that physically you can tell that, okay, I'm being triggered right now. How do I calm this down? How do I get this trigger to calm down? How do I manage this? And so it's important to recognize physically what your body does when it's being triggered. And it may be something different for you, but it's important. And maybe your body doesn't do anything physically, but it does something like your emotions tend to shift to anger. They may shift to fear. You may become sad. Look at the triggers emotionally. Maybe you don't have a physical reaction, but you have an emotional reaction. Your mood changes quickly. That may indicate a trigger. So look at that emotionally. Or it could just be your thoughts. Like if you have let's say someone is verbally talking to you and you feel like they're talking down on you, and that happened in another relationship. What are you thinking? Your thoughts can be disastrous. Your thoughts can be devastating. Your thoughts can be you can start thinking thoughts of negativity constantly, just bringing yourself down because that's what you're used to. These are all ways that you can recognize these may be triggers for me. This may be triggering a past trauma, something that has happened before that is making me feel like this person is treating me this way, or this person is treating me like a past relationship did. So that's ways that you can try to learn those cues of, okay, a trigger is coming on. I will also encourage you, when you're trying to determine, once you recognize that you do have triggers, and that's the first step. You have to recognize when you have triggers. What are your triggers? And when you're trying to learn the cues of a trigger is coming on, I would say journal. I would say get a journal, get something, and write down, on this date, when this person yelled at me, I started, my physical response was that I tensed up. My emotional response is that I became sad. My immediate thoughts were, you're not good enough. You can't handle this pressure at work. Whatever the case may be, I would encourage you to track your triggers. Write them down. Every physical reaction, emotional reaction, every thought, write it down and see. Also write down what your reaction is. Do you shut down? Do you lash out? Do you get defensive? What is your response when that trigger happens? Do you withdraw? Do you begin to blame other people for what's going on? Write all of that down so you can recognize what what triggers you, first of all, how your body responds, how your emotions respond, how does your thoughts respond, and then what is your response? What do you do when you're being triggered? So I would suggest that you write all of those things down, because once you are able to recognize it, you have better chances of controlling it, controlling that response, where you're not shutting down, where you're not getting defensive, where it doesn't turn into a huge argument, where you aren't lashing out, or whatever your response is. So that way you're seeing what happens, you're able to reel it in and control that response, whatever that response may be for you. So I do suggest that you get a journal and write those things down so you can recognize. It's important that you recognize what triggers you, and how you respond, because it's an impact on your relationships. I do believe that when you are triggered, your reaction is not just about the person in front of you. It's about the manifestation of something old, something from your past that you haven't dealt with. And a lot of times we think out of sight, out of mind. Oh, that happened to me when I was a child. It doesn't affect me today. It does. It comes up in your current relationships. It comes up in the way that you handle business. It comes up in the way you handle money. It comes up in the way that you handle your body. These things from your past do come up when you don't deal with them. And a lot of times we just think, oh, it's old. I'm over it, when you're not. And it can damage your current relationships. It can damage a working relationship where people may not want to work with you anymore. You could lose your job. It could damage your a dating relationship or a marriage, where people don't want to be around you because they don't want to be abused. They don't want to be lashed out at. They don't want someone shrinking down and not communicating with them. So it's important that you realize that triggers come from something that hasn't been dealt with, a past wound that has not been dealt with. And it's important that you recognize that and recognize where it stems from, where the trigger comes from, and get the help for that. But there are several ways that it impacts our relationship. Miscommunication is one. Triggered reactions can often lead to immediate defensiveness or attack. It prevents you from having a genuine conversation with someone. So someone may be coming to you, let's say you're in a relationship, and they're coming to you and they're saying, you never wash the dishes. Why don't you ever wash the dishes? That may be something from your past where you were always forced to wash the dishes. Someone constantly yelled at you about washing dishes. And so that may trigger something in you to make you be defensive and make you lash out at that person when it has nothing to do with them. They're just wondering, why do you never wash the dishes? But because you can't have a genuine conversation, a constructive conversation, because it's like you're taking everything someone says wrong. You're relating it to something from your past. So then you can't see or hear what they're saying because you're already on the defense about something that happened from your past. And it's just based off, that's the way they handled you before. But this person may not, they aren't handling you like your past. And so you can't see how they may be trying to help you, or how they may be just trying to get an understanding of who you are and why you operate the way that you operate. And this can happen on your job. There are ways that people can do something on your job that makes you feel defensive, and it causes miscommunication where you guys aren't communicating well. It can happen in your family. It can happen in any relationship, and it can cause an impact on that relationship, because once you begin to respond in a negative way based off a trigger, based off a past trauma that hasn't been dealt with, people don't want to work with you. People don't want to be around you. People may not want to be your friend or be in a relationship with you because of the way you are now handling them based off your trauma. So you have to be aware of your triggers. This goes back, being aware of your triggers, being aware of your past that you haven't dealt with. Trust, okay, a person, when you continue to react the different ways that you may react from your trigger, people can't trust you. People can't trust that if they say things to you that you won't respond in a negative way, that you won't blow up on them, that you won't shut down on them. So people begin to not trust you. When people can't trust you, we all know you have to have trust in a relationship in order for any relationship to work. If I work as a team at a job with a team, I don't feel like I can trust that person, it's not going to be a good working relationship. Same with your children. If your children feel like they can't trust you as a parent, they're not going to want to be with you. A spouse or someone you're dating, there's no trust there. There's no relationship. So when people feel they can't trust you, here again, it's breaking down a relationship that possibly can come to an end. It impacts that relationship. Also, you have to be careful that you don't cause trauma on someone. You can, if you're constantly on the defense, if you're constantly lashing out on people, if you're constantly shutting down, you're doing the very thing that people did to you, to someone else who does not deserve this. You can cause trauma in them. And that will cause them to have triggers. So you got to make sure you're not repeating the cycle. When you're when you don't have your triggers under control, your response can cause trauma to the person you're dealing with. And it's not fair to that person because they have nothing to do with your trauma. Your trauma happened in the past. It happened before them, before they were born, before you guys met, or whenever. And so you can cause your trauma, you could put trauma on someone else from your trauma, if that makes sense. And so then people will begin to withdraw from you. The person being reacted to will pull away to protect themselves. And it will lead to emotional distance. It will lead to isolation. It will lead to the breaking down of your relationship. Like I said before, it will lead to people not wanting to be around you. And people will withdraw to keep themselves, to protect themselves from your abuse. Because in a way, it becomes abuse to the person that you're responding to. And so people will, to protect themselves, they will withdraw from you. And you may wonder, why aren't we communicating anymore? Why don't we talk? Because your trauma, you're putting your trauma on someone else. And they don't want trauma. People have their own stuff to deal with that they don't want more trauma. They don't want to deal with your stuff and be affected by your stuff. And it impacts your relationship. And it will cause a breakdown in your relationship. And it will cause, like I said, trust issues. It will cause people not to want to be around you. So you have to be careful that you're not pushing trauma on someone else by your response to something that may be something they are even trying to cause a friction with. They're just trying to get to know you better, or they're just trying to talk to you, or whatever it was that they did that brought about the trigger. Just know that they are not that person who caused the trauma. That's important to know too, that you recognize the person you're dealing with right now is not the person who caused that trauma. And they shouldn't be treated as that as well. They shouldn't be treated as the person who abused you, the person who lied to you, the person who hurt you in whatever way. The current person you're in a relationship with, it's not their fault. So you shouldn't put your trauma on them. But recognize your trauma and get the help from your trauma. So let's talk about strategies for managing your triggers in real time. because we have to remember that a lot of times it can happen so quickly that you can be triggered so quickly and you respond immediately. So let's talk about strategies in real time. The first thing I would say is pause. Pause, pause. And that's just physically stopping the interaction. So if you're in a conversation with someone and they're saying something that is starting to trigger you, you could just stop and say, hey, you know what? I need about 5 minutes, or give me an hour, whatever it is, however long you feel like you need to collect my thoughts and to process what's being said or done. So that way it gives you time to stop before you respond, and it gives you time to process and think about what's being said, what's being done, so that you won't be triggered and react in a negative way. And you have to make sure you understand, this is not abandoning the situation. This is not trying to avoid what the conversation is about or avoid the situation. What it is just that you're trying to avoid reacting in a negative way that can cause a bigger issue between you and that person, or a bigger issue in your relationship, because you're wanting to put a pause on this conversation so that you can communicate better later. You know, because you're committed to this conversation, you're committed to working through it, but for you to give a better response, you're putting a pause on it and you're gathering your thoughts, you're processing what's being said, and then you can come back to the table and have a conversation or handle the situation with a more calm, relaxed mind that's not triggered by something from your past. So I say pause. Another thing is a grounding technique that we have used. I've seen it be used in classrooms with students to help when they're getting emotionally triggered, getting emotionally upset or whatever. But it focuses on your senses and it brings you back to the present, because you're being triggered by something from your past. And remember, the trigger is something from your past. But when you do this grounding technique, it brings you back to the present of the current relationship, not with the person from your past. So then the grounding technique is to name 5 things you can see. So you pause and you you see 5 things. Name 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can touch, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. When you start focusing in on other things, it brings you down, it calms you down, and it grounds you to what's currently going on. It takes your mind off of the trigger from something in your past, and it brings you to your current situation of what's going on. This helps you, like I said, it helps you get you calm. It helps get your mind off the trigger. It helps you to be able to react or respond in a calm way. And that's the most important part, that your reaction is in a calm way, that is not in a negative way that will impact your relationship in a negative way. You want to be calm in that situation. You have paused the conversation. You have grounded yourself and you are now calm. Now you can communicate effectively. Now you can communicate where you're not accusing someone. You can communicate without lashing out or blaming them. So when you return back to the conversation, use I statements to express your feelings. That way you're not blaming someone and saying, well, when you did this, and this. No, you bring it back to yourself. So you can say, when X happened, I felt Y because of Z. So let's say let's say it this way. When you pointed out something I did wrong, I felt frustrated because I was a child. When I was a child, my parents always pointed out what I did wrong, and they never helped me learn from my mistakes. They never praised me for anything I did good. So when we were in a conversation and you were pointing out how I made this mistake on this project that I'm working on, it made me frustrated because I could only hear my parents in the background and all that they said when I was a child. So it lets the person know you did nothing wrong, But when you did that, it brought up an emotion that I had from when I was a child, and it triggered me. That's why I had to take the 5-10 minute hour break. That's why I had to do a grounding technique so that I can get my triggers under control. I can get my emotions under control so I can respond to you better. So you want to make sure that they understand. When you raised your voice at me, I felt unheard, because when my previous boss would yell at me, he wasn't listening to what I was saying. You know, it's like letting them know this is coming from another place. This isn't just, you know, it's not you. It's something that's triggering me, and I have to deal with it. So I have to take a break. I have to calm down. But it's important that you make sure you communicate what you are feeling without blaming the other person, but also letting them know where it comes from, you know, and being vulnerable and being open to say, hey, this comes from something that's deep rooted. This comes from something from my past. It has nothing to do with you. It's just that when you did this, it triggered me from something in my past. And so that helps your partner to be able to understand you better. It helps the partner to be able to, maybe they have learned to communicate with you differently. Well, I realized that when I pointed something out, the way I did it may not have been constructive for you. It may not have been something that was helpful for you. So now they recognize that, and maybe they will change their language or change the way that they communicate with you. But you have to communicate. You have to openly communicate with that person and let them understand this is something from my past that I have to deal with. So I'm doing techniques. I'm doing things to calm myself down so I can respond in the appropriate way. But communicating with your partner about triggers is very important. You have to have a calm, non-triggered conversation with your partner about your triggers. You have to let them know that you have triggers, and these are the things that trigger you. But it's important that you do it when you're not triggered. If you're triggered and you're trying to, it's not going to go well. It's not going to go well. So it's important that you wait until you're calm. It's important that you wait, and when you're not triggered, to be able to tell that person about your triggers. And like I said before, you have to make sure you're willing to be open and honest with your partner, in this relationships. You have to be open and honest, because that way they can recognize what your triggers are as well. And they maybe can help you or be on the lookout, or like I said before, change their language, how they approach you and how they handle you with situations, knowing your triggers. I do believe that a relationship is a partnership in healing. Everybody always have something, and you're constantly, trying to heal from things. And so you have to have that partnership in that relationship, to understand that I have these triggers. I have these things going on that I'm trying to heal from. So they can support you, or if they feel like it's too much, and honestly, that may be the case, where they're saying, well, I just can't be in your life right now. And that's okay, because people have to be able to set up boundaries for themselves and to know what they can and they can't handle. So it's important that you're honest with the people that you're in relationships with, so they can know how they want to handle the situation. Remember that the goal isn't necessarily that you're trying to eliminate the triggers, but also that you're trying to manage them. If you eliminate them, great, that's awesome. But you want to also be able to manage them so they do not control you. They do not control your response or your reaction to a situation. Honestly, there may be something that always reminds us of something from our past that we may have trauma from. But it's not necessarily like trying to erase it, but like I said before, knowing how to handle it, how to respond. but like, say for example, there are things that are triggers for me that were from my past relationship, but I'm not on edge about it. I don't get that lump in my throat like I told you before. I don't get emotional, but instead I recognize, oh, that's a trigger. And I start thinking to myself and calming myself down and managing that situation where I don't get emotional, where I don't get that lump in my throat and I physically tense up, where I'm not scared, where I'm not about to get in a ball and cry. So these are things that's called managing my triggers. So I recognize them like it's coming up. I'm like, oh, that's a trigger. So then I know how to manage myself and how I respond so that even when that happens, I'm not triggered really. Like the trigger is there, but I'm not triggered. I'm not responding in a negative way. I'm managing that emotion. Okay. So that's important that we learn how to manage the trigger. Not necessarily, like I said, trying to erase the trigger, because you can't always erase the memory. You know, the trauma happened. It could have happened when you were 5 and it pops up when you're 35. You know, the trauma happened, but it's how you respond when you're triggered by something from your past. How do you react? And most importantly, when it comes to relationships, making sure your partners, the people who mean the most to you, the relationships that you have, that they understand different parts of you, that they understand what triggers you, so they can work on how they communicate with you and how to respond to you when you might just lose it and lash out, where they might say to themselves, okay, this is probably a trigger. Let me not respond, you know, in a way. So when we do have a question that came in, and the question when it comes to this subject, it says, what if my partner is the one who is often triggered? How can I support them without sacrificing my own needs? And that's coming from the other side of things, you know, right? We've been talking about ourselves, like the triggers in ourselves. But this is a question from someone who's on the other side, that's in a relationship with you, with someone that is being triggered. And this is probably a common question, because most people want to know, how do I handle the situation? Well, first of all, you have to remember that you can't fix your partner. You can't fix the trauma. You know, you just can't. You can't fix them emotionally. But what you can do is be their supportive anchor. You can be there to support them when they are triggered, helping them calm down, helping them get grounded, helping them even face or recognize, maybe your partner doesn't even recognize their triggers or what causes them to be triggered. So maybe you're there for that type of support, but you can validate. It's important that you understand that you can validate the feeling, but not the behavior. Okay, it's okay. I see that you're really hurt right now. So that's validating the feeling, but you're not agreeing with the lashing out. You're not agreeing with the behavior. I see that you're really hurt right now, but it's not okay for you to talk to me like this. It's not okay for you to shut down when we're in the middle of a conversation. It's not okay for you to blame me for something I didn't do. That's validating the feeling, but not the behavior. So it's very important, because if you validate the behavior, your partner is going to constantly continue to do these things. Validate their feelings. They're legit to have those feelings. They're legit because there was some trauma. And we know trauma, how trauma takes us there, you know, and how trauma can be devastating. Validate that feeling. It's okay for you to have that feeling, but it's not okay for you to respond the way that you responded. It's not okay for you to react that way towards me, because I did not cause that trauma. But you also have to maintain your boundaries. It's okay to disengage and say, you know what? You're being aggressive right now, so I'm going to walk away. I'm willing to talk to you, but I will not be yelled at. We can revisit this at another time when we're both calm. But you have to set up your boundaries. But it's also important that you remain calm and not to react, because you got to realize that's a trigger. That's something that has nothing to do with you. So you have to remain calm as well and not respond, but set that boundary up and let them know, we're not going to do this right now. Let's maybe revisit this later. And then you just make sure you have your own support system. You know, don't become your partner's sole emotional regulator. That's not your job. That's not your position. Your partner should recognize that they need the help and get the help that they need. If they can't do it on their own, if they can't recognize and start doing the work themselves, they need to go get the help they need. Counseling, life coach. Y'all know I'm a big advocate for counseling and life coaching. But they need to get the help they need. You cannot take on their emotional issues by yourself. You should not be the only person. They need to get the help. They need to do the work themselves, because if you're doing it all, they'll never get it done. They'll never. And then the thing about it is, if you move on, they're going to just do it to someone else. So it's important that you don't try to be their sole emotional regulator. You can't do that. They need to be putting in the work themselves. They have to recognize this in themselves in order for it to get better. And if you feel that they aren't getting the help that they need, or they're not trying to work on their triggers, guess what? It's okay to walk away. It's okay to say, you know, I don't want to develop triggers myself from this relationship. I don't want to become that type of person that you have become to someone who doesn't deserve it. It's okay to walk away. It's okay to say, you know what? I can't handle this emotionally. This is not for me. I wish you the best. I'll be praying for you, or whatever the case may be. But you got to set up those boundaries. And if it means walking away, sometimes it means walking away, because the abuse, the trauma, and what they've been through, they're putting it on you, and then you develop trauma. You now become a person that's being abused, and that's not okay, because we don't want the cycle to continue. We want that person to get help, but if they're choosing not to get the help, you walk away. You make sure you are safe, and you get the help that you need if it's gotten to that point to be safe, you know. So again, we want you to be able to recognize your triggers, recognize what's causing you to react the way that you are, and how you can calm yourself down, how you can manage your triggers and get the help that you need. Okay. This is a very important discussion. This is something that can keep going, that we could continue to talk about. We could take it to a social media platform if you guys would like, but it's something that's very important that people don't really talk about. It's something that people, and I don't know if people don't like to talk about triggers because they don't want to bring up their past. People don't want to deal with the trauma that they have. People don't want to deal with their past because they look at it like, that's my past. If I bring it up, then something else bad may happen. But no, it's not about that. It's about recognizing your trauma and dealing with your trauma so that you don't put that trauma on someone else. And you may not even realize that you're doing it. You may not even realize that when you shut down, that's causing trauma for somebody else. When you're yelling at them because you're reacting, it's causing trauma. And you could cause trauma on someone and not even realize that you're doing it. So this is important, that you really have these important conversations with the people you're in relationships with, that you get the help that you need, that you recognize your trauma and you deal with it. You recognize your triggers and you deal with it. But I do hope that these tools and what we discussed today, I do hope that it helps you, and it helps you to recognize, like, hey, maybe I do have some traumas. Maybe I do have some triggers that I didn't realize was a trigger, you know, and recognize where it stems from. And you know, when you're recognizing, when it comes to relationships, when you start recognizing and understanding your triggers and managing your trauma and your triggers, it can help you have an unstoppable relationship. And y'all know that's what we want. We want to grow emotionally, which helps your relationships to grow. We want you to grow in every area so you can have an unstoppable life. That's our goal, to have unstoppable life. But it starts with us recognizing the truth, speaking the truth, recognizing the truth, and managing the truth. All right, guys, it was good talking with you guys today. Like I said, if you have any subjects that you would like to hear for us to talk about, or if you just need additional help, you can always reach out to me through email, rhcrowe, that's CROWE, at marriageunstoppable.com. You can go to our website, which is lifeunstoppable.com. You can find me on social media at marriageunstop1. That's on Instagram. But just, yeah, if you need anything, you guys know I know a lot of counselors. I know a lot of life coaches as well. If I'm not a good fit for you, I will help you find someone that is. And it's just important that, we get the help that we need, because we want an unstoppable life. But it starts with recognizing where you need to help, where you need to work at, where the work needs to be done. All right, guys, it was great talking to you again. Love you guys. See you the next time. Peace.